One civilization, two names. This isn't mere trivia. It's the master key to understanding how history itself is shaped, remembered, and ultimately controlled. Our history books are filled with the story of the Byzantine Empire, a glittering thousand-year civilization of golden domes and intricate politics. But this entire name is built on a lie, a historical forgery hiding in the plain sight. The people who lived there, they never called themselves Byzantines, not once. In their own minds, in their own language, they were Romans, Romaioi. Their state was the Roman Empire, period. Picture it. The year is 1000. You're walking on the cold marble floors of a palace in Constantinople. The air is heavy with incense and the murmur of Greek. You are a citizen of Rome. The eagle is still your symbol. The emperors are the direct successors to Augustus. There was no fall, there was no break. So if they were the Romans, why do we call them something else? Why does this ghost name, Byzantine, haunt our maps and our minds? The answer reveals a deliberate, centuries-long campaign to erase an identity. And it changes everything. What if I told you the world's first true global brand wasn't a tech company, but an empire from 2,500 years ago? Forget sleek logos. Think sun-scorched plains and the dust of 50 million subjects. This is the story of the Achaemenid Empire. It began with one man, Cyrus the Great, a name whispered in awe and fear. His armies didn't just march, they imprinted a new reality across the known world, from the Indus Valley to the shores of Greece. But conquest was only the beginning. Under his successor Darius the Great, this empire was perfected into a brand. It was a promise of power, of universal roads, of a sophisticated new order, built from the cool, carved marble of their capital, Persepolis. For centuries, one word communicated absolute authority and unimaginable luxury: Persia. But the people who forged this global identity, the ones at the very center of it all, they never called their own country by that name. The ultimate historical mic drop, an entire empire, rebranded by outsiders, based on a single province. The name we all know is a ghost, a label slapped on by enemies. Picture it, the 5th century before Christ. Greek soldiers stand under a blazing Aegean sun. They see an army unlike any other stretching to the horizon. These invaders came from a land the Greeks called Persis, a single, powerful province. So the Greeks, in the heat and chaos of battle, made a fateful decision. They called the whole empire Persia. It was a simple mistake, a convenient shortcut. But that name stuck. It echoed through Roman halls and European courts for over 2,000 years. The world knew them as Persians. The people of the empire, however, knew themselves by another name entirely, a name that spoke of nobility, of a shared heritage stretching back into myth, a name the West almost completely ignored. So what did they actually call their own land? The greatest secret about Persia? It was never their secret. The people knew their home as Iran, a name that shaped their very soul. For over 2,500 years, this was their truth. The name Iran, meaning the land of the Aryans, was whispered in caravans crossing dusty plains. It was etched into stone monuments under a searing sun. This was their identity, their connection to a shared ancient past. But the world heard a different story. The ancient Greeks, encountering people from the Pars province, called the whole land Persis. This became Persia, a simple mistake, a geographical misunderstanding. Yet it stuck. While European cartographers drew maps filled with the word Persia, a different name echoed through the mountains and valleys of the empire itself, a name that held the true key to their history. So how did one name, born from the outside, nearly erase the real one from global memory? They shattered the empires, burned the libraries, yet the very soul of Iran remained. Here's the impossible truth. Picture the air over Persepolis, thick with the smoke of its own history. Alexander's armies stand in the ashes of a world power. The name, Iran, should have been buried under Greek script and philosophy, but it wasn't. It became a ghost, a memory whispered in the highlands. Centuries later, a new storm from the west, the Arab caliphates, a new god, a new language of power. The old ways were driven into the shadows. The very word for this land was replaced. Again, the idea should have died. It should have been forgotten. Then the Mongol hordes descended, a storm of pure destruction. They leveled cities, leaving nothing but dust and bone. This was the true apocalypse, the final, brutal end. Yet, from that silence, the most incredible paradox emerged. The conquerors themselves began to speak of Iran. They adopted its culture, its poetry, its soul. How does an idea conquer an army? Imagine renaming a nation. Reza Shah did. But this wasn't just a name change. This was a declaration of war. The year is 1935. A cold, formal directive is sent from Tehran to the world. A single, powerful demand. Stop calling us Persia. We are Iran. We have always been Iran. To the West, it felt like an era. The name Persia was steeped in romance. Cyrus the Great, the poetry of Hafez. But for Reza Shah, the name Persia was a colonial cage, a label used by outsiders to define them. This was a calculated strike against British and Russian influence. He was forging a modern, unified nation from the ashes of a fractured empire, a nation for Iranians, defined by Iranians. He reached back 2,500 years to the Achaemenid inscriptions. They never called their land Persia. They called it the land of the Aryans, Aranshar. So, was this a new name? Or was it the oldest name of all finally being reclaimed? One name, one nation, one massive self-inflicted identity crisis. This is how it began. For centuries, the world knew Persia. The name tasted of spice and poetry. It felt like silk and ancient stone, a brand built over 2,500 years of empire. Then, on a cold day in 1935, a memo arrived at embassies across the globe. A quiet, devastating request. The government in Tehran insisted the world stop using the name Persia. The official name, they declared, was Iran. The world was baffled. Why would a nation willingly erase its own legendary identity? This wasn't a foreign conquest. It was an internal command, an act of historical self-sabotage. The goal was to connect with ancient Aryan roots. The unintended consequence was confusion. It disconnected the country from its globally recognized brand, creating a phantom limb of history. But this was more than just a name change. It was a signal, and the real reason was buried far deeper than anyone understood. Forget what you learned. The name Iran didn't erase Persia. It was meant to embrace it. We uncover the shocking truth. Today, the world is split. You run your hand over the intricate threads of a Persian rug. You hear the melodic flow of the Persian language. You admire a regal Persian cat. These are brands of history, of artistry, of a timeless culture. But on a map, on the news, the country is Iran, a name that carries the weight of modern geopolitics. For many outside its borders, the two words feel like two different places. One is a fairy tale kingdom, the other a headline. Inside the country, the reality is far more complex. It is a daily negotiation of identity, a constant dance between an ancient soul and a modern state. So how did one nation end up with two names in the global mind? And which one tells the truer story? The land remembers, and its memory unlocks the secrets of our very identity. For over 1,000 years, a single name has echoed across these vast plains: Rus. It was whispered by Vikings on the warm currents of the Dnieper. It was inscribed by monks, the candlelight flickering on cold stone in Kiev. It was forged into an empire behind the imposing red walls of the Kremlin. But who truly owns this name? This is the central paradox. The question is a ghost that haunts the centuries. Each era tried to capture it. Each ruler, from Vladimir to Ivan the Terrible, tried to define it. They wrote it into their laws. They shouted it into the biting wind of battle. Yet the name remained elusive, a reflection changing with the light of history. The struggle was never just for territory. It was a war for a soul, a battle for the answer to a single, profound question that historian Fodorov called the eternal query. Who are we? And that question even now echoes a show. It is a quest that is not over. It is a story still being written in the heart of this ancient land.